what we call economic justice work, which means helping low-income employees who have been denied their wages. We help with folks who have issues before the IRS or State Franchise Tax Board. We help small businesses and their development needs. We also do a lot of housing work. So people who are facing eviction and housing insecurity. And then a lot of individual programs that focus on how people are facing legal issues and how best to connect with them. So one example of that is we have a partnership with a medical facility called Harbor UCLA in the Long Beach area, where our attorneys are embedded in the facility and paired up with like doctors, nurses, and social workers. So as the doctors and nurses are seeing social issues that are impacting the health of their clients, they can refer and work with our attorneys to help address those social issues. So kind of on the other end of the spectrum from Kath Rogers' agency, where they do impact litigation, we're working with individual clients and sometimes bringing to agencies like the ACLU, information about what we're seeing, trends that we're seeing, so that we can like either partner with the ACLU or organizations like that, or they take on the big systemic issues. So we all form this like collaborative trying to support the community. And really delighted to be here and looking forward to getting to know you all.
We're happy to have you here as well. Mr. Lam?
Hi, I'm Phil Lam. I am the Intellectual Property Counsel for the City of Los Angeles. I currently work in the executive branch or unit office of the city attorney, Mike Fuhrer. I report to the chief of staff. If anything that would go wrong in the intellectual property field, there will be patent, copyright, trademark, or data privacy, cybersecurity, or antitrust recovery, I will be on the hook. Otherwise, anything that the front office, Mike and the chief of staff would give me, I do. So my job description is I do everything as assigned. From the question is basically how I made it or how I get here from there. I look back, oftentimes I live a life of oblivion, that I am oblivious to a lot of things that just happen really good to me. And I do have a belief, a religious belief that it's really God guiding for me to help other people, even though I didn't know why I was there and why things happened to me. I mean, I have not applied for scholarship or awards, and they were given to me. They opened doors. But the journey really has been, and Capri asked me, he said, hey, you have a very interesting background. But I thought, yeah, that's true. In summation, it'll be, I was from a stupid teenager in Hong Kong to a culture shock, little less stupid high schoolers in Canada, and then college, grad school, and law school, and become a lawyer in the United States. I don't recommend to you that just turn off your signals and the radars and just things happen. I do not recommend. What happened was that, again, it's not about me, it's about my life journey that might shed some light. Number one, I pour a scam on my father under the pretext of higher education. I said, that'd be great if I have some money in my bank without parental supervision. So I told my dad, hey, look, I'm gonna go to boarding school in Canada. And curiously, he said yes. So I was the first one who left Hong Kong, didn't know anyone. Well, actually, I want to go to the United States because I heard that in the US, you don't have to study. Of course, I was wrong. No one told me as a high schooler because I didn't know anyone here. So I thought, well, Canada's the next best thing up north. So I went to Canada high school, but I ended up being in Chicago for my undergrad and grad school as an engineer. So I was an engineer for some time in Chicago, New York, and Long Beach for Boeing. which put me through law school. And that's a second kind of data point for oblivion. The only reason I went to law school was because it was free. Bowen paid for my evening school, and I was always interested in the law or world affairs. And that's the point about follow your heart, follow your interest. So I went, after one semester, I thought, oh my God, I can actually be an IP lawyer. I can have a good career doing more, bringing about more changes. I love engineering, don't get me wrong. So each step you can combine your experiences and your interests. And so I became a prosecutor in the city attorney's office before going back to a big law firm to be a patent litigator. But I love it so much. And then I realized I did not have a student loan. Why would I go to a sweatshop? And so I stayed, and somehow I had a great career in the city attorney's office, from litigating in DC, suing Microsoft, open up the IP intellectual property practice law for the city. And I've been in the executive office for some time, since 2014. And what is good about public service is that you can bring about changes a lot more easily. So a lot more easily, and you have the access to the decision maker. Unlike civil lawyers, you only have one due to your loyalty. You only have one client. As a public service or government lawyer, you have the public and the entity. So, you know, that aside, that is just why it's so good. And I think I would end up by saying a couple points. Number one, follow your heart, follow your interests. If you love something, whatever kind of law or law-related career, you would do well. You would do well. The money would come. Don't worry about that. And I want to leave with a few key points. Number one is the sky's the limit. You can be the first one in your family, in your community, in your nation, or even in this universe to do a certain thing. The sky's the limit. Number two is that put it out there. Whether you want to go to law school or you want to be an actress, or whatever it might be, put it out there. The universe will help you. People would know, but you have to let them know. And number three is that be active to get mentors. You can have multiple mentors, but you have to be active to build a relationship and get it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that advice. Again, feel free to drop your questions or turn your camera on or mute yourself if you have a question regarding to the entire panel or a specific individual. Just when to start off, some of you may have gone straight from law school, straight from undergrad to law school. Some of you may have taken a gap year or multiple. If you could share your experience on either path.
I mean, I can jump in there. I didn't go directly into law school. As I mentioned, you know, law school was actually, it was something I did think about growing up, and it was something I wanted to do. There was a period when I was in high school when I kind of fell out of love with the law and fell out of love with kind of the political system. It just wasn't representative for me in many ways. And in many cases, it was kind of, it was working against me as a Black man and such. And so I actually started thinking about culture and storytelling and producing content. And so when I went to college, I focused on business development and actually developed a production company and a student film program at the Cannes Film Festival. And so when I graduated college, I came to LA to work primarily to become a producer and to think about producing content. But it was a unique time. And in 2007, when I graduated college, it was right before the recession. I actually was impacted by the recession. I was actually laid off in my first role, and then went to work for Fox in digital strategy and particularly mobile distribution, mobile entertainment, which was a completely emerging field at the time. The iPhone had just come out. And so really kind of had an opportunity to kind of immerse myself in that space. But I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I knew I needed to go to grad school if I wanted to be, I think, successful as a person of color, I think, to navigate the industry at its senior levels. And so I initially started with the JD MBA pathway. I decided just to kind of stick with the JD at the time. And so that's kind of how I got, but I spent those 3 years while I was working, studying for the LSATs, in my spare time, and really focusing on that. So it wasn't a straight line, but it was definitely worth it to have some experience as well.
Yeah, I can speak to my path too. Similar to Brian, I did not go to law school right away. In fact, I didn't go to college right out of high school either. It took me, I had a very winding path. I was very passionate as a teenager just about, social justice issues, housing and homelessness and, economic inequalities. And so I wanted to become a community organizer, and that's what I did. Out of high school at 17, I wanted to work on campaigns, political campaigns, to make social change. And I thought, I never thought I would be a lawyer. I was like, this, that seemed too much, being inside the system. I wanted to kind of be on the outside, making change from the outside. And so I worked on political campaigns. I worked on, I gathered tens of thousands of signatures, worked with hundreds or thousands of volunteers on passing local legislation and state legislation and educating folks. And, I wasn't the best high school student. And I didn't, I started attending some community college classes just because I wanted to learn. And then I had this great community college professor, a history professor, who talked to us about current events, talked to us about issues that seemed relevant to me and really kind of made school matter for me. And that class in community college forward, I got straight A's after that. I dedicated myself and got, I studied history. I wanted to learn more about history and how it connected to present events. And it really kind of clicked. And so it did take me 8 years to get through school, but I ended up transferring into UCSD and getting a degree in history eventually, and worked as an organizer, community organizer throughout that time. And then continued with community organizing. I see a question in the chat. How hard was it to transfer from community college? I took, at that time, there was a TAG program, Transfer Admission Guarantee. I don't know if it's still a TAG or if it's a different program, but I spoke to the counselor. I would go in person all the time and talk to the counselor and just say, what classes do I need to take? How do I do this? And they put me on that Transfer Admission Guarantee to the UC school. And so at that time, you were guaranteed admission if you did, certain things that were on that TAG program. So I followed the counselor's advice, did every single class they told me to do. I'm not a math person. I had to take statistics. That was the highest level math I took, anyway, I transferred in and then continued with community organizing after I graduated college. So I found that, I still wanted to stay in that career. Then when I was 26, 27, I, wanted to have another tool in my toolkit. I had worked on a lot of campaigns at that point, gathered a lot of signatures, recruited and trained a lot of volunteers for campaigns, and decided that I wanted to try law school. So I started studying on nights and weekends for the Lsat, which is the law school admissions test. The Lsat is what you need to take to get into law school. And I started reading a book, about the Lsat, ended up taking the Lsat. I did pretty well, but not great. In fact, I studied hard for the Lsat, but I had never taken that test timed before. So when the proctor called out time in the first section of that test, I was just on adrenaline. I was panicked, did not know how I was going to do. I did all right, not great, but I did get into the law schools in San Diego where I applied, and then ended up getting a scholarship, a full tuition scholarship based on, undergraduate GPA and also just leadership that I had in the community. So that's one thing to consider. If you want to go later in life to law school, you'll have a little bit more to show for competent leadership that may get you a scholarship down the road. So that was one thing that I really, valued, was not going into debt during law school. So I took 4 years to get through law school because I worked mostly full-time, sometimes part-time. And then I went to law school part-time, which was a 4-year path, and ended up graduating from law school and wanted to pursue public interest law. And I knew that. So I loved going to law school as an older student because I valued it. I was so grateful to be there. I was the nerdy student in the front of the classroom asking all the questions. I had some life experience to bring to bear in law school that, I could connect it to my work that I was doing. Oh, good question. How did you juggle work and school full time? That's a good question. I did not have a whole lot of, social life at the time, but, trying to make, my goal was to get out without debt so I could go into public interest law. So I had that scholarship, and then I worked as an organizer, and, I didn't make much, but I paid my, rent on my studio apartment, and I could afford groceries, and that was about it. And, but, I had fun with it. And I think that's the difference is, as an older law student, I really tried to have fun in law school. And I think, you appreciate it when you have some life experience to bring to bear with it. So I'll turn it over to the other panelists now.
I think I want to echo Kay's comment. Having gone to evening school and working daytime in Long Beach, driving to Loyola evening 4 nights a week from downtown to downtown, it is very challenging. But I have to say, though, most students in the evening class really enjoyed it. Otherwise, we would not be there, having to go through all the difficulties, logistic, everything. For 4 years, I was eating my dinner while driving from Long Beach to downtown. And my choices of dinner were very limited between Wendy's, McDonald's, or Jack in the Box. But that's something you have to bite the bullet and build the grit and do it. The second point I want to echo about having some what we call, a lot of my managing partners, friends call a gap year. Oh, by the way, let me back up a little bit. I have been in Bar Association leadership since 1998. And president for 3 different bar associations, and I just rolled off as a senior VP for the LA County Bar Association, where I've done quite a bit of damage in terms of changing the bylaws and making the bar association to be more inclusive in the leadership. So I'm in touch with a lot of in-house lawyers, a lot of law firm friends, and one thing they said about new hires from law school is that they actually appreciate some new grad who have a gap year. That means they have a life experience, not just from undergrad to grad school, to law school, and then law school come out. And so that experience really is important. So one thing, though, is if you do want to have a gap year, be careful that if that is your goal, just stick with it. Because it's important. It's easy that you start making some money, buying different toys, and then you have to have the kind of income to sustain your lifestyle, and then you basically got distracted from your original goal of going to law school. It might be that's the way it would turn out. That's fine, but there's one danger on that.
Sorry, I was having a tough time finding the unmute button. Yeah, I saw a question here about the importance of having a double major or minor when applying to law school. And I think, to try and build upon and tie together some of the comments that have already been made. And others, please feel free to chime in if you feel like this isn't accurate. But I think at the end of the day, there's no one formula, right? I think what you've heard from all of the previous speakers, and looking back in my path, and I did take one gap year between undergrad and law school, and thinking about when I now review resumes either for people who are interested in joining our organization, or my previous role in our organization was I would help set up our summer internship program, was that are you doing or have you done things that speak to what you are interested in doing with your career and with your life, right? So I ended up in children's rights advocacy, in part because during my gap year, I worked at a school in a low-income community. Most of the students, their parents were community members of color. And so I started to see how different legal issues were impacting their lives, right? And that started to inform the type of advocacy that I wanted to engage in. And it helped me take what I was learning in law school, take what I was learning during my summer internship, and put it together with the lived experiences that I had seen in the lives of my students, in the lives of their parents, right? And I suspect that for Kath, that was also something, right? When she was organizing, seeing the impact of like policy and law on the lives of our community members, or for Brian, right? How working in the industry, how that impacted all of us, right? And so that is part of what makes you a really good advocate, lawyer, business leader. You're able to marry, right, all the theory and learning with real world implications and practice to be that advocate, that leader, whatever your ultimate role is, and even maybe not even practicing law, right? But I think that's why you have to really be strategic about what you're doing and how you do it.
If you could give yourself a piece of advice before you began to apply to law school, what would it be?
I think it's exactly what who was it? Diego just mentioned. I think have a plan. You know, I think some people, they do just kind of look at law school as like, okay, I just want to be successful. Or I just want to kind of follow a path of like, hey, that's what people who make a lot of money do. And I think that is going to be a pitfall in many ways if you don't have a clear plan on your goal for law school, what you're going there for, you know, what you want to get out of it. And, you know, like I said, I was voted most likely to never practice because I was literally working in the industry during law school. I was heavily involved. I built my own management company during that time. Was working with, you know, folks. So people knew that that was my pathway from very early on. And also, but I made sure that I was also the smartest entertainment law students in my class, the smartest intellectual property law student in my class. It wasn't just that I was going there to just have the thing, but I went there with a very strategic purpose and I executed as much as possible on that purpose.
And I want to echo what Brian just said. And I mentioned it before, you have to have an interest in a certain thing and you know how to get from here to there. But the most important thing is that it's a purpose in a minute. What do you want to do? And I asked my nephew in 2015, he said, hey, Uncle Phil, I want to be a lawyer. I said, why? I literally was sarcastically saying, why? I mean, it was like, it's not, some of my lawyer friends have a miserable life unless you take control of your goal and your path. And I want to make sure that my nephew was not going to say, I want to be just like on TV, you know, the glamour and making money and all of that. That would be the worst reason to go to law school. So until he could justify why he wanted to go to law school, so I'll help him. I mean, I'll help him anyways, but I would probably, I would not help him. Is this gonna want to make money? No, go to MBA school or something. Go own a gas station or something. But he has purpose, and that he learned how to get from at the time there to his goal, each intermediate step. So you want to kind of identify and have your mentor help you identify each intermediate steps. And that includes, your GPA, your Lsat, how to build your resume, your internship, any scholarship you can apply for and get it. And basically you want to build your resume. And also it's something called, well, a lot of family who haven't had, or first generation, or haven't had people gone to college, don't have, is what the California Supreme Court Justice Goodwin Liu called he alerted us is called what you call repeatedly the social capital. And there is your connection, your people who knows whom in different corporations or in different law school and so forth. So it's a social capital. Okay. That is important.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Breakout Room number 1, How I Made It, Journeys to and from Law School. The session will run about 30 minutes. Again, my name is Karina, and sorry, I was getting some feedback. My name is Karina, and I will be the staff assistant for this room. With that, keep a few things in mind. Feel free to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, or send a message to the chat on any question that you may have pertaining to a specific panelist or everyone as a whole. And now I'll pass it to our speaker so you can briefly introduce themselves. We can start off with Mr. Walker.
Thanks, Karina. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Walker. I'm the CEO of an organization called Picture Motion. It's a social impact agency, specifically working with kind of the film, television, and other storytelling industries like audio, written publishing, and even emerging technology experiences like XR, VR, kind of AR experiences. And I've worked at the intersection of social justice, social change, and culture for over 10 years.
Ms. Rogers?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kath Rogers. I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU of Southern California, where I work on our Dignity for All project, which works on economic justice and advancing the civil rights for folks who are unhoused, and also working to fight criminalization of poverty. And I also teach over at USC. I teach a class called Law and Local Political Activism and work with clinical students on a civil rights internship program there. And before going to law school, I was an organizer, a community organizer on social justice campaigns. So I took a gap before going to law school to do work that I was passionate about, and then went back to law school later in life. And I'm looking forward to talking with all of you.
Mr. Lam?
Hi, good morning, all. I'm Phil Lam. Currently, well, I've been since 2002, the Intellectual Property Counsel for the City of Los Angeles, and since 2014, reporting directly to the Chief of Staff in the Executive Office of Mike Fuhrer, the City Attorney. In other pro bono capacity, I have been president of different bar associations, and I just finally retired from the LA County Bar Association last year, where I've done a lot of damage in terms of making it more inclusive and diverse in the leadership. That's another story. How did I get from there to here, so to speak? I have some white hair, you can tell I'm old. I actually lived a life of oblivion, that a lot of good things happened to me that I had no idea, even at the time, understood why it was happening, what was happening. But as it turned out, they all were good. And I think it's a way, for the guy upstairs to work through me to help other people. And so I was a teenager in Hong Kong, a stupid teenager, who pulled a scam on my father, trying to have a lot of money under my bank account, going to boarding school in Canada with no parental supervision. But the dean of the Catholic high school was more strict than my dad. So my father was the one who had the last laugh. And then I was also still a stupid teen, high schooler in Canada in the boarding school. Then I went to Chicago for my undergrad, went to University of Illinois, where I got my undergrad and graduate degree, both in engineering. I worked in Chicago and New York designing nuclear power plants, and then brought out here by Boeing to work on the aircrafts, different aircrafts, excuse me, it was in Long Beach. And then I went to law school because of one reason. It was free. Boeing would pay for my evening school for 4 years, as long as I stay on the payroll for a full-time engineer manager. And I did. And I had an interest. I had an interest in the law and world affairs. And after one semester, I thought, oh my God, I can actually make this a career to be a more of service. And so I did. And then after that, I was supposed to be at Jones Day to do patent litigation, marrying my previous experience of engineering and the law. But I came into the city attorney's office for 10 months, trying to pick up my trial experience when I was chief and go back. Then I had such a great time in trial court, being a prosecutor. And I realized, a lot of big law firms are really sweatshops, not what I wanted. And I'm not talking down on those different, reasons for different, time. My nephew is in a big law firm right now in Germany. He enjoyed it. So my point is that you got to find what you like to do. And at the time, I did not really care. I loved the work as a prosecutor. I had no pressure for paying my student loan. Like Kath was previously mentioned, her one goal was trying to be financially independent from law school, which is a great one if you can achieve. And then from there, I end up staying in the city attorney's office in a great career. And in the meantime, it allowed me to do more public service work, pro bono work, whether it's in public aids, legal services, or bar associations, and where I could, I effectuated some changes over the years. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Cartagena?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dio Cartagena. I'm the president and CEO of Tzedek Legal Services, a nonprofit legal services organization in LA County that provides free legal help to low-income individuals on a wide array of areas of law that range from elder law and elder abuse prevention to helping people with economic justice issues, like making sure that people are getting paid the wages that they are owed. We also help undocumented immigrant children who have been abused, small business owners who need assistance with legal issues related to their business, and then have some unique projects such as a program that's designed to help members of the transgender community with, for example, instances of housing discrimination, employment discrimination, et cetera. I'm an immigrant to the United States, came here when I was very, very young, and originally thought that I was gonna go to medical school to be a pediatrician, but got kind of sidetracked. When I was at UCLA as an undergrad, found that I was not good friends with chemistry. Those classes didn't jive with me very well. And so I sort of wasn't sure what I was gonna do next. And I actually took a gap year, and during that time was working at a grade school that was in a low-income community with primarily students and parents of color, and realized that there was a lot of legal issues that these families were facing. And that's what ultimately led me to law school and going down the path of a nonprofit career. So I've been in the nonprofit sector since I graduated law school, and really honored to be here and looking forward to taking questions.
Thank you for that. As a reminder, feel free to unmute yourself, turn your camera, or drop your question down in the chat. To start off, how did law school shape your life? And we can hear from Ms. Rogers again.
Well, okay, so I mentioned that I went to law school later in life. So right out of high school, I knew I wanted to be a community organizer, which means, working to change laws and policies. I gathered tens of thousands of signatures to get propositions on the ballot. I worked with hundreds and thousands of volunteers on various campaigns. And then at about 26, 27, decided I wanted to go back to law school. And I just felt like being a lawyer would be another tool in the toolkit to create social change. And in terms of how it changed my life, I mean, I think it's given me a tremendous opportunity to work on, impact litigation, to create systemic change for civil rights. So that, it's a pretty incredible tool to make change. Also, I think going to law school, I mean, it teaches you to think like a lawyer, right? So it teaches you to think with a level of precision about language. For example, there's words that, in lay language mean something. And then when you're a lawyer, they have a specific legal term of art. So, for example, the word damages or, the word, reasonable has a certain a certain meaning in case law. And so you think a lot more precisely, I guess. You learn to write differently. You learn to analyze issues differently. And, so I think that's powerful, right? Learning to think like a lawyer. I think that's a powerful tool that you can use. Something you're going to learn in law school is called Irac. You're going to hear that term a lot in law school. It's called IRAC, which is Issue, Rule, Analysis, Conclusion. And you're going to start analyzing every single legal issue through that lens. You're going to learn to issue spot, and you're going to learn to apply facts to rules in a very particular way. And so it's a tool, right? And it's something that, legal minds all around our country think in this way, and you're going to get to learn how to think that way. And so I think, it's a tool like anything else. If you go into policy, if you go into law, if you go into business, there's different tools, and it's a powerful tool that you'll have access to.
I see someone has their hand raised. Jolanda, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'd actually like to direct this question to Ms. Rogers. I believe you said you're a community organizer. I think in my career trajectory, I've transitioned from wanting to be a policy researcher at Congress to actually wanting to be a community organizer. But I just want to see if you could share in your experience. Do you still, or are you able to have interpersonal experience and actually see the impact that you make as a community organizer? And how has your law degree how has it helped to shape just your perception of the community you're serving, and to analyze and actually be able to see what the bigger issues are and how to actually resolve them?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, I highly recommend the path from community organizing to the law, because I think that you'll be a better lawyer if you start as a community organizer. Community organizing is gritty. It's tough, it's long hours, but you meet a lot of people and you work with a lot of really dedicated folks who are, dedicated to the same issues that you are. And so I think, meeting people and understanding issues kind of at the ground level is really important for lawyers. There's this idea of community lawyering and movement lawyering. And I think when you start as a community organizer, you take that perspective into the law. And when I see people who go directly from college to law school, you can be a tremendous lawyer going that path, but I think when you take that gap year, and especially when you go into organizing, you can really see how policies impact real people. You can get practical knowledge. I think the best lawyers are practical. They talk to their client about, what do you want to get out of this? Because sometimes you can get that through the law, sometimes you can't. And so maybe your client is best served not by going through 3 years of time consuming, stressful litigation, maybe you can sit down with them and figure out, a policy route to get that same outcome, or some other, mechanism by which they can get that. So I think it gives you a different frame, and it also shows you the limits of the law too, because, if you're a civil rights lawyer, you're limited to the civil rights we currently have. When you're an organizer, you're changing the law and you're realizing the limits of the existing legal system. And so it kind of shows you the holes, right? If we have, the existing Bill of Rights and the existing California statutes and California Constitution, what's missing? We don't have a universal right to housing. We don't have a right to medicine and healthcare and all these things, these affirmative rights that we want. So I think it gives you a more holistic perspective on the gaps in our legal system. I mean, it's a flawed system. It's a, very, very, very flawed system, and we need it to change. And that's why we need to do this work. And so I think litigation is not the only tool. And I think when you're a community organizer, you realize that, and you realize we need to make change, big change. And so I think that's the perspective that community organizing can bring to the law. And I think that's why it can be helpful, but it's tough work. And when I was 26, 27, I was like, how many more signatures can I gather? How many more times can I pound the pavement? So I mean, I wanted more intellectual stimulation, and I really enjoyed going back to law school for that reason. So yeah, that was my experience with it.
I'm so sorry. If I could just ask a really quick follow-up question to that. So in regards to the time commitment, my background is I'm currently a grad student pursuing my Master's of Public Administration. So in regards to the, I guess the time commitment, would you suggest in order, because I do intend on going to law school after, but I want to continue to, understand my community, would you suggest that, and I forgot to say that I would like to obtain a position as a community organizer within LA County, would you suggest that maybe I allow myself that professional experience just working as a community organizer and then contemplate law school? Or is it something that, I should still just be continuous in my education so that, once I finally get my law degree, then I will have that voice to actually speak on all the deficiencies that I've been, observing?
I mean, I'm a big fan of doing what feels right for you. And so kind of what your gut is drawing you to. But if you feel like you could use a break between your master's program and, the JD program, I think that might be a benefit if that's calling to you, because that might give you more contacts, more understanding of local, issues. And especially if you want to work in LA County, the different nonprofits that you can, maybe plug into, and different issue areas you can plug into. So I think that's so unique to you and what's calling to you, but I think it can only help you after law school to get those contacts and that real experience. And then it might give you ideas of the type of clinical work you want to do during law school to get that experience.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your question. Now for Mr. Walker, how did attending law school help your career in media?
So my kind of pathway to law school initially, I wanted to, as I mentioned in the last panel, I wanted to become a civil rights attorney when I was growing up in my youth and up to high school. I decided around that period not necessarily pursue a law degree. When I went to college, I tell people I got arrested. There was it was an instance of me understanding the law and understanding really clearly the experience of the racial inequities of our criminal justice system and the law that we live in. And so I really looked at culture and storytelling as a primary focus. But there was something actually that was great as I learned as I went through my early career in entertainment and media, and that having that foundation of understanding law, of being interested in law and civil rights was amazing, particularly for the career path that I was going to be leading on. I knew that I wanted to use storytelling to create social change. And so, like Kath mentioned, I was a community organizer in many ways within the entertainment industry. That was my focus when I started. I was organizing people of color, really thinking about, moving the needle on inclusion and representation in the law. or in the media field. And so when I went to law school, I understood holistically like the full toolbox that I had at my disposal, whether it was policy change, whether it was litigation, whether it was kind of all the stakeholders, even using precedents of other industries and other, impactful kind of social change efforts as kind of a driving force, and how I could use that within the entertainment industry. And so, having that law school experience opened me up in a very significant way to be able to start to practice that way, to start to actually look at social change, not just from having better culture, but it all has to be integrated. And so today, now I work with policymakers, I work with social justice leaders, I work with general counsels at at small production companies and large media companies. I work with a large ecosystem of legal advocates, and because of my background, I have the ability to engage them in a much more intentional and strategic way than, say, my other counterparts who didn't necessarily have that experience, do not even understand kind of the history of civil rights and the connection to law, and in the ways that I have been able to kind of approach the work. I don't know if that's helpful.
Very, thank you so much. And for Mr. Cartagena, I know you mentioned previously that you helped build the Special Immigrant Juvenile Status Program with your organization. If you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that's a example of kind of taking some of the things that you learn from your practical experience and out in the world, and putting it together with what you learn in law school. So as I mentioned, I worked at a school for a bit, and many of the children that were in my classrooms were undocumented, and saw the impact of what that meant for them. And so I had the opportunity to start a fellowship program at the organization that I was working with at the time, that focused on providing legal services to undocumented immigrant youth who were here in the US, and who, because they had been either abused, abandoned, or neglected by their parents, had a path to become legal permanent residents here in the US. And I really saw that as an opportunity to open doors for some of these youth. And I want to go back to something that was mentioned before, and I think maybe it was Catherine mentioned it. As an immigrant, as someone whose first language is Spanish, when I was in law school, I really did see being in law school as learning another language, right? Learning a third language. And I saw that in how I was practicing the law. My clients knew that they wanted to become residents, knew that they wanted to maybe ultimately become citizens, but didn't know how to get there. And I knew the steps and the specific words, and I knew how to put together words like their story to help them down that path, right? But one thing, and I think this is a component of how you practice as a lawyer, and change lawyer, movement lawyering, community lawyering, things like that. I also knew that it was very important, since I wasn't always going to be there next to my clients with the different issues that they faced, to be able to teach them little bits and pieces of what I had learned, right? So that hopefully they would be more prepared as they moved down the road. And that's always, I think, something that all of the attorneys on this panel are always looking to do, right? We're hoping to change the landscape, not just in that one instance, but hopefully that individual that you're representing is not only in a better place, but better prepared for what they face ahead, or the corporation you're working for, the entity like Mr. Lamb, right? The city that is better prepared. If you're working with an entertainment company or an individual, how they're moving forward in the entertainment industry, right? You're always looking for that larger impact.
Thank you so much for that. We do have 5 minutes left, but Jolanda, I would love to hear your question.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to dominate the conversation if anyone else had questions, but this question, if I'm saying that correctly, But one question I have is, I think I heard you say that you used to work in a school district. I have that similar experience, and I do know that I have an option to either work for a nonprofit or maybe even start my own. But I guess I just want your opinion or experience. While working in the school district that's already established institution, do you feel like you were able to actually put quantifiable action in place to changes you want to see, or do you feel like you had more freedom to do that in your nonprofit?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think it depends on the nature of the change that you want to have. There may be strategic benefit to being within the system and changing the system from within itself, but there are instances in which being outside of it puts you at an advantage. I think at the end of the day, it's doing the analysis, understanding what the roadblocks are, and then deciding on a path forward and who your allies can be in that path forward. So to give you a concrete example, I've always had a vision about working with school districts to provide legal services to the children and families that are there. And we always used to come up against this roadblock where the school district's lawyers would say, no, we don't want you in the schools because we think really what you're going to do is teach our students and parents how to sue our schools. And I would say, look, I don't even know how to bring that kind of lawsuit. I'm not that smart of an attorney. I really just want to help the kids with like their immigration status or their family law case and things like that. And ultimately realizing, you know what? I'm going to go knock on doors with the LAUSD school board members and pitch this idea to them. And they were like, yeah, no, our students need this. I will talk to the lawyers and we will resolve this and get this done as quickly as possible, right? So that's, you have to strategize in that way and figure out what's the best path forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I may add one more thing is that, actually 2 points. One is that if you recall, the councilman, Paul Gregorian said he was derailed for 20 years in practicing law instead of going to public service. Now, if public service is not on your horizon, it's okay that you can go into private law firm and do your thing. What I would encourage you to do is that do not forget about public service or public interest law. You don't have to be doing that. You just can donate money to Tzedek, ACLU, or some different causes who does the work for you. Okay, so you can bill 10, 15 more hours, a year, and then donate that money to it. Then point number 2 is that on the social capital that a lot we don't have as a first person who's going to college or law school or don't even know about the financial aid or grant availability, which would have prevented my nephew from going to college because he did not know when he was a teenager that there were financial aids available. He's now practicing in Germany as an M&A lawyer. So the social capital we have is that you basically reach out to people, mentors.
It looks like we're out of time. But for our speakers, thank you so much. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to drop down your email address in case anyone has any follow-up questions. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Breakout Room 1, How I Made It, Journeys to and from Law School. My name is Karina, and I will be the staff assistant for this room. Before we get started, just a quick few announcements. We do have a Spanish interpreter. Feel free to send me a message and we'll be more than happy to provide the translation for you. Our speakers will briefly introduce themselves with their name and their current job position, and then we will open up the conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself, turn on your camera and ask your question, or also feel free to submit it in the chat. With that, we can begin. Mr. Walker.
Hi, my name is Brian Walker. I'm the CEO of Picture Motion. I am a non-practicing attorney, but have been kind of an intersection at the legal, social justice, and culture industries for over 10 years, and really have looked for ways to use my legal background to support both better representation in Hollywood, as well as greater representation of our stories on screen and across various storytelling mediums. Before this was at the Walt Disney Company, where I worked with the Chief Diversity Officer, managing our stakeholder engagement efforts with communities of color for several years, and so worked across the entire family of brands. And then before that was at Color of Change, where I started their Hollywood office focused on culture and entertainment advocacy. And I worked in social impact a little bit before that, right after law school, but it was primarily focused on film and television. And so, yeah, I'll pass it on.
Thank you for that. Ms. Rogers.
Hi, everyone. We have a more intimate group, so I'm glad we can get to know each other. I'm a staff attorney over at the ACLU of Southern California, and we are a civil rights advocacy organization that focuses on what's called impact litigation to bring about larger societal systemic change to advance civil rights. And I also teach over at USC. I teach a class called Law and Local Political Activism, and help students in a clinical program for civil rights who are doing internships at organizations in the community. Prior to going to law school, I was a community organizer for many years and went back to law school at 26, 27, and took the scenic route through law school, worked during law school, and had kind of a different perspective because I came back after having some life experience to bring to it. And really excited to be here with all of you today.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Cartagena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diego Cartagena. I'm the president and CEO of Tzedek Legal Services, which is a nonprofit legal services organization here in LA that serves low-income individuals across LA County. We cover a wide array of issues that range from helping with elder law and elder abuse prevention to economic justice work, which focuses on making sure that people have the economic stability in order to thrive in their lives. We also have a program that focuses on housing insecurity and homelessness. And then we have a couple of different programs that are less about the subject area, the law, specific law, and more about how people are impacted in their lives by the law in terms of how they end up needing legal services. So for example, we have a partnership with a medical facility where we have lawyers embedded at the hospital so that they are working with doctors, nurses, and social workers to help address the legal issues that the community members are facing. I am an immigrant to the US. English was my second language, and I've always thought of the law as a third language that I can use to deploy on behalf of the clients that I serve. I did take a gap year between undergrad and law school, and really believe, as I think has already been mentioned, that really informs the practical application of the law and starts to help you build out how you want to use the law to bring about change. And looking forward to any questions, folks.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Lam.
Yes, I'm Phil Lam. My paying job is the Intellectual Property Counsel for the City of Los Angeles. I work in the executive office of the City Attorney Mike Feuer. Reporting to the Chief of Staff, I basically do whatever they give me. Although if anything goes wrong with the intellectual property that is having copyright trademark, what data privacy slash cybersecurity or antitrust, I will be on the hook for. So it's an exciting job where I can bring about a lot of changes, and also help recruit more women and diverse lawyers into the office. My non-paying job, which actually takes up since 1998 the most of my time, few wee hours, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, would be through bar associations. I've been in president leadership of 3 bar associations, the largest Asian bar in California, the Southern California Chinese Lawyer, and also co-president for the Lesbian Gay Lawyer Association, and also most recently the LA County Bar Association, where I did a lot of damage in terms of making it more diverse and inclusive. And also I do my pro bono work through some public law organizations like the AAAJ, the Asian American Advancing Justice, formerly the Asian Pacific American Legal Center, which does a lot of impact litigation, also like what the Ms. Rogers doing at ACLU. Also academically, I have been helping the UCL. Excuse me, that's the one I did not help. It's USC. Sorry, it's USC and the Loyola Law School, where I went to law school at night. And I co-founded the USC IP Law Institute in 2003 and remain on the exec committee where we train a lot of IP lawyers. Where incidentally, I've been trying to push for more diversity and women into the practice of IP law. So we have some success and we have a lot of work to do. And then I was an engineer before becoming a lawyer. I was an engineer in Chicago and New York, designing a nuclear power plant, and then was hired in by Boeing to Long Beach to work on jumbo jet. And soon after I arrived, within about 9 months, I took advantage of the Boeing program of financing my law school at night. So I went to law school for 4 years at Loyola while being a full-time engineer in Long Beach. And that was tough, challenging, but very enjoyable and rewarding. And that's probably one of the best things I did to myself, other than kicking myself out of the home and pulling a scam on my dad by going to pretending to go to high school in Canada from Hong Kong. Anyway, I'll stop from there.
Thank you so much. Start the discussion. I know that everyone here explored other career options before heading out to law school. How did that impact your law school education, or how did that make you a better candidate for law school? And we can go in the same order. So, Mr. Walker.
Sure. I think, I kind of knew at the time that having that experience was really important. There was a part where I was thinking about even going after, I took 3 years off before law school from undergrad. And at one point I was like, oh, I want to go right into it. But I spoke with a few attorneys and folks who had kind of gone through a legal career, and they themselves said, it was better to have some experience and to be able to bring that into law school. And then to also, because it would enable me to have a clearer focus on my path of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to use law school to kind of further that. Because, law school is not the end. It's really just a part of the journey. And so really getting clear about, what my intentions were really helped me to just be more strategic in law school and enjoy it probably a lot more than my counterparts who were right out of college and focused primarily on being in the top 10% and focused on getting a firm job. I really just was not focused on that at all. I knew kind of where I was, what I wanted to do after I came out of law school, and so I think having that period before helped me.
Hi again, everybody. Yeah, I also took time off between college and law school. I also took a while to get through college as well. I took about 8 years to get through college. Was not the most focused student. I knew that I wanted to be a community activist, community organizer right out of high school. So at 17, I set out to do that, started working on campaigns, gathering signatures for, ballot measures and helping with, organizing volunteers. And so that was really my career right out of high school, just knowing that, there's a lot of social injustice, there's a lot of economic injustice, and kind of knowing what I wanted to work on. And so I dabbled in community college for a little while, and then had a really great professor who inspired me to study history. Ended up graduating from UCSD with a history degree, and then took a little more time before I ended up going back to law school. And so really viewed law school as another tool to create social change. And so I think that perspective of being a community organizer, having that, real world experience, it made me appreciate law school so much more. I was grateful to be there. I was grateful for the intellectual experience that it gave. I was sitting in the front of the class, just feeling grateful to be in that classroom. And so I really think that taking that time, I wouldn't have been ready for law school at, 20 years old. I just wouldn't have been, or 21. I wasn't there yet, mentally, emotionally, and so I think that working first and working as a community organizer gave me that grit, gave me the life experience to know how to go to law school and how to succeed in law school. I don't think I actually could have been a successful law student had I not had that real world experience.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that. The opportunity to work at a school really allowed me to see, what is the impact of the law of policy on the lives of the students and their parents, right? And allowed me to understand, well, if I want to make a change, how best can I make that change? And I think, you marry those two things together, and in part it's because I see myself as a lawyer, but I see there's also a part of me that's interested in just like society, social change, etc. And I use the law as a tool, right? And when you see it that from that perspective, you have to understand that how you use it is really impacted and reinforced by your own life experiences, which allow you to connect in a different way, I think, with your clients, right? And the impact that it's going to have on their lives. One thing that I haven't mentioned in other panels, that real world experience also allows you to build your network. I've in the past, I've struggled with the whole concept of networking and things like that. And I think networking for purposes of building your Rolodex and saying like, oh, I can call on this person or that person, for me, isn't really the point. The point of networking is now I'm connected with individuals who can either be my mentors, my guides, or help me understand the structures that we're trying to change. And ideally, help me strategize on how we can work together to impact that change, right? So when people talk, you probably have all heard a lot about the importance of building your network. Keep that in mind, right? That it's not just about, great, I got a card and I can make a phone call and things like that, but it's how does it fit into what you want to accomplish with your law degree, whether you end up practicing law or not.
Is it me? Trent?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I don't want to belabor the point about the gap, the value of the gap year. To me, it was one well covered by Brian and Kath. That is the value of the life experience value that enriches your ability to go to law school, to get better grades, and have a better resume and be more desirable to whoever the employers you're seeking. But the number two, I think more important, is also for you to gel what you wanted to do with a law degree is the right career for you, and what you're going to do after that. And that, I think, is just as important. You don't want to go to law school, have some debt, and then only to find out that really is not for you. So that is the thing. I want to touch upon the networking thing, which I think is very important for most of us who don't have the social capital, i.e. the connection to people in high places or people who can make a phone call and so forth and have internship opportunities. I think the networking all began with anywhere. It does not have to be lawyers. It can be your pastor. It can be your family. Your doctor you see. It can be anyone. But the important thing is that you have to put it out there. Now I can tell you two examples. And I kept saying my nephew, right? Because he got his big law firm job, which he actually wanted at the end, because through his high school best friend's girlfriend, who knew a lawyer at a firm, who did not get him, a summer job, but then knew someone who turned out to be his future boss in Germany. So it's all about networking. Networking is like, don't be shy to put it out there. One time I was at a checkout line at Trader Joe's. Before I finished checking out, I got three business cards shoved to my face because of one conversation, and I was not even looking for it. So you have to put it out there.
Thank you so much for sharing. We do have a question. Mr. Taylor?
Hi, just want to first off start with saying thank you all so much for hosting this breakout room. It's been very informative, very enlightening, and invigorating all in the same breath. I just want to ask, while incorporating elements from the last breakout room I was in, surviving your first 1L year, and including topics relating to this one, when you're going through law school and keeping in mind that you want to stay out of extracurriculars as much as possible during your first year, and as you transition through law school, and then trying to find a job or whatever it is your passion may be after you graduate, how do you start, or when, I guess is the better question, should you start forming your book of business? I mean, I know that it relates heavily into networking early, and I know there's no certain answer as to when you should particularly start, but I guess what I'm trying to find out is what is the more common practice for when you should really start paying attention to who it is that you would like to start building your book with, or where would you even start? Like, how does that process start? Building your book of clients, I should say. Thank you.
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, of course.
Sure. All my friends in law firms, and I give out outside counsel contracts also. It's about one word: networking. Now, as to how and when, like I said, anywhere. I was at Trader Joe's line and I got 3 business cards, and that's how you build the network, if you will. But one thing about networking is this: you don't want to put the goal of building a book business in mind when you network. When you network, if it's a business setting, you just wanted to build relationship and a friend. Don't start at just the second day, a second meeting, start asking for business, because people are going to run away from you. So the one thing is just to build a relationship. If people like you, they trust you, they would, believe me, they would call you for business. Okay, that is the number one thing. Do not be like business hunting, but a relationship building. The better way I found out in my relationship, in my networking, is that I've been told I have many politicians, candidates who will call me for support because I've been told that I have a deep and big Rolodex. I did not build them because I never went back to law firms. I built them through pro bono services, through academic services, through conference speaking. So none of those I had business in mind. And in fact, they all saw me as doing good for other people, finding jobs for my law clerks, connecting people, doing, you know, whatever projects there would be. I formed the LA County Boss Presidential Task Force on Social and Racial Justice in 2019. And for example, that's one of the many things I've done over the years, and through which I knew a lot of people, not just lawyers, but judges and everyone. You know, so that is the point about building business, building relationship, as opposed to building a book of business.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that, you know, as someone who's kind of worked in both commercial, public interest, kind of nonprofit. And I would say I've, you know, been known as a really significant networker, but all of that has been in many cases built by taking on additional, you know, internships and volunteer opportunities and engaging with people. You know, timing is, I understand the idea of like, you know, focusing on 1L year and ensuring that you have that under your belt. I think everything also depends on your situation. I don't think there's a one size fits all. You know, obviously, if you're going to a law school where, you know, the predominant group of your law students are, you know, coming from more well-to-do backgrounds and they do have greater networking already built within their foundation, then there's some things that you're probably going to have to do a little bit earlier and build that resilience around it. I don't think there's ever going to be like, this is exactly the time. But I think it is about gauging that, but keeping in the fact that, you know, if you create transactional networking partners, then that's all they're going to be going forward is transactional partners. If you create relationships, then they're, you know, that can extend much deeper and it's more than just the kind of, you know, just the business that you might be able to get from that. So.
Thank you so much for your question, Mr. Taylor. And a follow-up question pertaining to your journey after law school, if anyone can share their experience from applying to jobs or applying or like studying for the bar exam.
I can go first. So being the first person in my family to go to law school, it was all a mystery. And so it was very beneficial when I connected with programs like UCLA at that, and it still has this program called the UCLA Law Fellows Program that takes students from different backgrounds and exposes them to things like LSAT prep courses, and you get to audit a law school class and things like that. So it helped build my network out and give me some perspective and some resources and tools. I didn't do that well on the LSAT. It was good enough to get accepted into some law schools. I had a strong GPA though. I did miserably my first year of law school. It was such a different experience for me. And in fact, you know, my career services person said, you know, don't hold your breath in terms of what jobs you may have, right? And look at me now. I am running an entire organization, right? And so keep those kinds of moments in perspective, because you're in it for the long haul. Pace yourself, build your network of friends, family support that can be there for you. You know, start strategizing. What is my ultimate goal? Where do I want to end up? And don't be afraid, by the way, to explore different options. One of my summer internships, my very first year of law school, was working at a very small nonprofit doing family law work in East LA. And I loved it. I just completely fell in love with it. Everything that I had struggled with in law school all suddenly made sense. And I loved working with my clients. And that kind of took me in that trajectory. But then I made sure, like, oh, you know what, let me try that housing clinic. Let me volunteer here or there. And it, at the very least, it served to solidify, like, you know what, housing law on behalf of young adults, teenagers, turns out that that really is what I want to do. I thought that's what I wanted to do my first year summer, and now I'm really convinced of it, right? And so be okay with kind of meandering a little bit and exposing yourself to different things.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Diego said about using your law school experience to really, try different things. I basically didn't take, I can't remember any, well, I can remember one elective class that I took in law school. Everything else was clinical. I spent an entire year in what was called the Veterans Law Clinic, which was formerly unhoused veterans. And we did every type of legal work. We did family law, probate, bankruptcy, military charge upgrades. I took a probate case to trial. I was a lead attorney on a probate trial while I was in law school. I mean, it was an incredible experience, and I got to know clients and really, dig into issues. I also volunteered my whole time in law school for what was called Think Dignity. I was down in San Diego. It's a nonprofit called Think Dignity. It was a homeless referral clinic, and I could start that in 1L year because you could do referrals at 1L. So you got to issue, do client intakes, talk with clients about their issues, and refer them to legal agencies that could help them. And so throughout law school, I was like really just digging into all of those experiences and starting to work with, I knew I wanted to work with unhoused clients. And so I did that all through my 4 years of law school because I took the scenic route through law school. I was working, and I took part-time law school over the course of 4 years. And so by the time I graduated, I had a really firm understanding of what I wanted to do and, the types of law that were out there. And I had kind of, law school doesn't teach you how to be a lawyer. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer. So I would take every possible opportunity you have to do clinical experience or internships during law school, because that's the only thing that's going to teach you how to actually be a lawyer and go in and do legal services or litigation or whatever you want to do as a lawyer. Those clinical programs are really, really valuable.
If I may add a couple of things. One is that the USC has a first gen program, similar to the one that was talked about, Diego talked about, I believe Diego talked about at UCLA. And it is almost like the tech program at the JC that Kath previously talked about, the guaranteed transfer from a junior college to UC system. And if the student gets on the program as accepted by this first gen program from a law school, he or she is mentored and coached as to how to prepare for law school, Lsat, and all of that. And at the end, he or she is most likely will be accepted by USC Law School, and all attendees and meetings from USC Law School has been for years will be receiving full or partial scholarship. And so that you may want to, just see which school and the financial situations. And the second thing about the preparation for the law, and I'm sorry, I'm taking different pieces from different responses, but I think it's important, is LSAT and GPA. GPA you might not be able to change, but let me give you a story. I have a top in-house counsel friend who went to UCLA Law School. Guess what? His undergrad at Occidental College, GPA was not good enough for UCLA Law School. What did he do? He went back to junior college after graduating from a bachelor from Occidental College and pull up his GPA, and then he got admitted to UCLA Law School. Okay, I thought that was very clear. Second thing, LSAT is very important. If you can take a prep course, take a prep course. There's some free prep courses, although not very widely available, but look for it, take a prep course. If nothing else, just take a lot of practice. For those of you who have a choice right now, statistically, the discipline, undergrad discipline that would score the highest by discipline would be philosophy students. because of the fact that they practice on the English writing and the reasoning skill and the argument.
Lastly, Mr. Walker.
I guess one thing I can think about, I'm trying to think, obviously, I think this was the question about just like preparing for LSAT, preparing for pre-law school. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, you can also mention that, or like your journey after law school as well.
So, yeah, getting a job and going to take the bar. So I've taken the bar. I did not pass. I'll be honest. But as I said, I did not put as much effort into it. I didn't want to practice at the time. I was actually working full time and even producing like a series at the time. So I did not necessarily dive as headfirst into it. As far as getting my roles, I would say my law degree has helped me immensely with kind of my career path since law school. It just has been, a very, it has been a huge advantage because, I've taken on senior level roles earlier, probably than many other peers, because I've had the kind of professional experience of even just learning how to think like a lawyer has been helpful. I learned how to write like a lawyer and engage legal practitioners and stakeholders. Those things have been a big part of me getting my role in impact, particularly because I work in the intersection of social justice and culture and storytelling. And so it enabled me to understand environmental justice very differently, economic justice, education justice very differently. It enabled me to understand how to build. I had a business degree from undergrad, but there were many other things that I learned about contracts and about actually building the administration of a business that I've taken on and used for myself, both in my entrepreneurial ventures as well as in my kind of senior level roles in kind of my everyday work. And so it has definitely been something that has made me a very different leader than if I did not have, a legal background or law school as a part of my journey.
Thank you so much for sharing. We do have 2 questions from participants. We can start off with Mr. Anderson.
Hi. So a couple of quick questions. First off, just so you guys know, I have kids. You probably saw them a second ago. They're kind of loud in the background. I apologize. I think I'm aiming more towards Mr. Lamb with this question, but of course the rest of you guys can expand as well. I'm an incoming first-year evening student at Loyola, working full-time. By the way, I'll represent. I have an uncle who works at Boeing as an engineer, so. Just how did you balance the whole work life, evening school life, first year especially is so intense for law school, and then of course if anybody else can expand on familial stuff as well, I would appreciate that.
I think Kath can add a lot to it too. My experience, which might or might not, reflect on yours or transfer, but it was very tough logistically, especially driving every night, fighting the rush hour traffic when the 105 was being built. And I remember every night my dinner was in my stomach, and I was in downtown sitting on the traffic bumper to bumper, and I would fall asleep in my wheel because we were short on sleep. And I was so grateful I never had an accident. So you have to kind of know your weak point and your danger and whatnot, and manage that. And then time is the most important thing in law school, especially being an evening student. So you really have to do great time management. That I used to tell my students and mentees that when I was in law school, the interval of my time is 15 minutes. I look at my watch all the time, checking on my 15 minutes. That's my way of dealing with it. Another thing is to find an efficient way, what I call a gloves. Okay, you have to find a glove that fits you, whether it's daily logistics or how to study or not, that fits you, so it would be the most efficient for you to study. Okay, and the third thing is have a good study group, because no one survives without a good study group, especially evening class. I can tell you, I never finished an outline for any classes. The closest I did was for bankruptcy court. I did about probably 10, I don't know, 80%, 90% of it. And I did fantastic. I enjoyed the class. But my point about the outline, the importance of outline is that if you have a good outline, you would write the test a lot faster and you'll get high grades. So the study group can help you with that. The another thing about the work-life balance is bring your family to law school life. Introduce them. What is reception, at least to the parking structure, at least to the dean's office, the campus, and the journey. I mean commuting. And so they understand from your perspective where it is. I have in evening class about, we have about 90 people in Loyola out of 400 people, 300 people in the daytime. And by the way, the evening students bag all the top 5, top 10% of the entire graduating class. Okay, it partly because of the admission criteria for evening student, but partly because we meant business. And so in that small 80, 90 people in my class, there were at least two or three divorces in the first year. So you got to really integrate your spouse and your family into it. And that is the work-life balance. And then the last thing would be, now it's a lot better for corporations to help you with work-life balance. They're more understanding. Whether it's maternity leave, paternity leave, or school at night, especially after the pandemic, it's a lot easier to advocate for that. So get your employer to help you to be flexible in schedule or something. And the last thing is about part of the time management. You gotta have decompression time. I still don't tend to go out on Friday night, because Friday night was the only day I did not go to law school, and I decompress. I would not go out on Friday night, and I still kind of tend not to do that as a habit. But you have a me time, decompress time, no matter how short it is. And I work out in my gym, and whatever it is, don't study all the time. You gotta have a balanced life, cooking, adding, whatever it might be. Take your mind off that. However short, half an hour, 15 minutes will be good. Spend time with your kids or your wife or your significant others. And that is basically the work-life balance that you really need. Otherwise, you get burned out.
Yeah, I would second what Phil said. I was also, I worked through law school. I took 4 years of law school. So I did the night school like Phil did. And yeah, I mean, like he said, it's about time management. Thomas, I don't know if you're going back to law school after a career, but okay, it sounds like you are. Yeah, so I think you probably have a lot of those time management skills from your professional life. But one thing that I would recommend my 1L year is I noticed that a lot of my peers, especially ones who weren't, working, would spend a lot of time kind of, thinking about every case and everything. And what I had to do, because I had so little time, is I thought, I'm going to read those practice exams so I know what I have to do at the end of this class. And then I read all the practice exams my first day of class. I would say, what do I need to accomplish by the end of this? And I would read those practice exams, and that is what you need to do. That's the output at the end of the class. And so, read your cases, all of that, the reading is important. And, but I'll be honest, I skimmed the cases, and then I would, highlight the rules. I would highlight the reasoning, all that kind of stuff. Some of the facts I didn't dive into as much. Like I would kind of, skim and really try to get the important parts of the cases. And you backwards plan from what you need to do. So create an outline based on, what it is you're going to have to do at the end of it. And and practice your practice exams early, because that's how you're going to master the class. You're not going to have to regurgitate every fact from every case. You're going to have to, issue spot and create create an essay basically at the end of the class. So kind of backwards plan, just like you would in your professional life. And then like Phil said, I think just balancing. I didn't have a lot of a social life. So, one piece of advice is to try to have fun with it, try to the extent you can, like try to enjoy your classes, like realize that you are in an intellectual space, that you get to do this. It's such a privilege to be in law school, and try to really soak it in, enjoy it. Because if you don't have much of a social life, enjoy what you bring joy to what you do. And like Phil said too, I would walk, I would do some yoga, some walks with friends, things to clear your mind, to keep you human, keep you sane through all of it.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. How long did it take, like Ms. Rogers and Mr. Lamb, how long did it take you to complete law school as a part-time student?
4 years. I took the 4-year path.
Same here. I think Southwestern had a 3-year accelerated program, which I don't think I would take, because if you think about it, you do 3-year law school in 4 years. Excuse me. You're actually doing 3/4 times, not half time. So it's already very challenging unless you don't have a job, to do or part-time job. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Now for our last question, Margaret.
It's more of a comment than a question, but each of you is clearly very passionate and ethical, and it's a dirty business. How have you maintained that? I really appreciate your kind of drive.
Are you saying people in the government are not ethical, or we're corrupt? No, I'm kidding you. I'm just gonna have my big mouth. I think you have to stick with your moral compass. You have your values in system, and you stick with that. And you kind of try to remind yourself, have some reminder, if you will, if you kind of go off straight. And once I have a piece of artwork in my office. It frames the in 1940s or old time 1950s Ford magazine cover. It was Ford magazine cover from the old time. What the message in there, in addition to being a fine piece of printed artwork, was it contrasts the life of urban poverty with the corporate C-suites people. I mean, at the time it was all male, white male. And so it constantly reminds me about humanity and the impact of on society of what I do as a government lawyer. So things like that can help you. And also I hang around with a lot of public interest law lawyers, and even outside, law firm folks, a lot of them, they are into service. They want to make some changes. So, they wouldn't let me go astray. So luckily, I still have, I haven't had any problem yet. And remember one thing, especially those in the government, or even in your management of your organization, power corrupts. Over time, power corrupts. Just remember that.
Thank you. And that is sort of the essence of why I'm asking, because you all have a lot of experience. And, it's also daunting what the obstacles are out there for true equity. And it's in that context I'm asking. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo what Phil said. My advice for new law students is don't let law school steal your soul, because it will try. And so, try to, if you can keep 99% of your soul by the time you get out, you're in good shape. And don't confuse the law with justice, right? Because just because something is the law or legal doesn't make it right, and doesn't make, law is not the same thing as justice. And just because we have access to this, prestigious degree, just because we have access, to the courthouse in this way, you need to remember why you went to law school. You need to stay in touch with that. And also try to keep in touch with and interact with as many non-lawyers as you possibly can, so you don't forget how to talk like a human being, and don't forget why you went there in the first place.
Yeah, and I would just echo the fact that I think society in many cases can be unethical because of the law and because of lawyers, and we need more people who are willing to use the law to try and reimagine what society can look like. So it's not necessarily that like you are definitely going to rub arms with people who are unethical, who are that is the predominance of probably where people are going in the legal profession is for some commercial gain. And at the end of the day, you have to look at it as like, if I don't have this tool to be able to affect the change, then there may not be people with a moral compass to be able to affect that change. So I wouldn't necessarily say like you have to be like everyone else. You have to even think that everyone else is going to be like you, but know that like I knew for a fact that there was only 6% of lawyers in this country that were Black. We need more Black lawyers, whether I believe that or not. So it was a matter of also just a need for our advancement in society.
Mr. Cartagena, did you have a comment?
The only thing I would add to that is some of us were very lucky that I consider myself very lucky that I got to go into public interest. I was able to afford it and have a great life.